Tonight, on History, So It Doesn't Repeat, we examine how your electric meter is being used to spy on your family. We'll talk with producer Josh Del Sol, discussing his new film, Take Back Your Power. We'll discover the pros and cons of smart meters, so you can make an informed decision. Learning's the answer. What's the question? It's all coming up next on History, So It Doesn't Repeat.
Good evening and welcome back to History, So It Doesn't Repeat. I'm your host and navigator, Richard Grove, and tonight we have an electrifying interview with Josh Del Sol, producer of the documentary film, Take Back Your Power. We'll learn how to identify our role in what's called the smart grid and discover how to remove the contradictions from our environment, one home at a time. To do that, I've composed a substantial list of questions, and with Josh's help, you'll have the answers you need to take the next steps. Josh, could you provide the audience with a basic understanding of your path to becoming involved in creating a feature documentary film project?
Absolutely, Rich. Thanks for having me on the show. Our film is called Take Back Your Power. It's available at takebackyyourpower.net. And it's essentially an expose on the smart meter and smart grid issue that is really waking a lot of people up to the control system on the planet. 2 years ago, I essentially knew about smart meters, but I didn't know how damaging they were to our rights and to our health and to, our utility bills and so forth. And I started hearing from a friend who got ill basically immediately upon smart meter installation. She developed symptoms without knowing the meter had been installed. And she basically was sending me a series of messages to say, I'm developing all these symptoms. I have headache and nausea and a skin rash, and I can't sleep in my apartment from the first night. She literally had to go sleep in her van. So some people are getting sick from the radiation, it appeared. And I needed to find out, how is this possible? Why is this not being talked about? And is this actually happening? Or is it some sort of like mass hypochondria that is affecting a certain percentage of the population? So that was my introduction to the issue 2 years ago. And today we have the full-length documentary film.
And where can people find that film should they be interested in after watching this video?
Our website, takebackyyourpower.net. You can order the DVD, you can stream it online, you can host a screening for your community. And what we're finding is it's a pretty effective tool for people to share with others and get them not only informed, but get them activated and helping to create a positive change.
All right, so let's start with the basics. Everyone that I know uses electricity. Growing up, we had these traditional utility meters, and a human being would come out to the house and they would read the meter and they'd send you a bill, and you pay the bill and you keep getting electricity. And that system seemed to work for a long time. Now in the age of the so-called smart devices, SMART is actually an acronym. And when you find out what that acronym means, it's not so smart. It's kind of invasive. And now that has trickled down to this thing called a smart meter, which is replacing these old-fashioned mechanical utility meters on houses. What is the claimed benefit for consumers, people who have to be around these new type of meters, and how is it pitched to them?
Well, we're told by utilities and governments essentially that the smart meters and the smart grid, they're going to save energy, they're going to make the power grid more reliable, and they're going to increase automation within our own home. They're essentially going to give us the control and ability to maintain and monitor and control our own energy use in our house.
That all sounds great. What's wrong with it?
It does sound great, on paper, like in the film. But essentially, none of those objectives are being achieved. So before we even get into the downside or the negative, effects that this is happening, basically they're not saving energy. Pilot programs and full-blown smart grid deployments are actually using more energy in almost all cases. Now, this is because of two things. It's because of the meters and the infrastructure themselves, the meters, the routers, the collectors. The network equipment itself requires more energy to function, adding multiple networks for electricity, gas, and water. And in addition to that, the NSA and other joint operations between government and corporations are actually launching and building entire massive data centers. As many of your listeners know, like in Bluffdale, Utah, there's a $2 billion data center. And that's, before we even get into the privacy aspect, that's using as much energy as a medium-sized city, one data center. So the meters and the grid are actually using more energy. The second point, making the power grid more reliable. It's actually the opposite. Even the FBI has issued notice that smart meter hacks are going to continue. Basically, it's been demonstrated that anyone with a cell phone and awareness of how to hack into anything can hack into your home via the meter. So, when you have a situation where you put everything online, which is, the famous statement, the Internet of Things, it seems to be desirable by these power centers to make everything online. You have a situation where anything can be taken down, either from a terrorist or a hacker or, a false flag operation or, what have you. So the third issue that we're being told is going to be a benefit from the smart meters and smart grid is it's going to increase our home automation. It's going to give us more control. Nothing could be further from the truth as far as us having control, because essentially what's happening is we're giving up control within our own home of even our energy access to our home can be cut off at any time. Utilities would have the ability in the near future to shut down either our entire home or segments of our home, appliances. They can, reduce the availability of energy to our very appliances and not only, monitor but control our access to energy, to water, to gas. So again, this is not just the utilities having this access. This is anyone with a desire really to get into your home via hacking. So this it's something that's kind of revealing itself to be doublespeak to the max, essentially, and which is evident just from anybody doing a cursory overview of the facts.
Well, what you're talking about is really revealing a bigger picture. You mentioned 1984, doublespeak, doublethink, these types of contradictions that are appearing in our culture. And this bigger picture really shows that the smart grid and the smart meters, they are facilitating data collection to be provided to organizations like the NSA, who are not concerned with conservation or sustainability or making your life any easier. So it's those sales tactics that are, hey, the smart grid or the smart meter or the smart device is going to make your life easier or better, whatever they're pitching. You have to ask the question, what do those organizations have like on their boardroom table that says it's their job to add value to your life? It's not about that. Those are sales techniques, and it's a lure on a very sharp hook that's getting into your home. So that brings me to my next question about this so-called smart grid. I have Fourth Amendment rights to be protected from unreasonable search and seizure of my private property. How do smart meters infect my environment, and how do they breach the integrity of privacy?
So that's a really good question about privacy. And what we're finding is even the utilities themselves and even governments are admitting that, the data is, number one, not going to be secure. And number two, they're going to have granular data on you really to a level that's never been seen before in outside of the home, let alone inside of the home. So there's a congressional research report that was done last year, and I have it right here in front of me. And according to the words in this report itself, it says the following: with smart meters, police will have access to data that might be used to track residents' daily lives and routines while in their homes, including eating, sleeping, and showering habits, what appliances they use and when, and whether they prefer the television to the treadmill, among a host of other details. Now, we cover this point in the film, and we get into it much more deeply in terms of the smart TV patents that have been submitted by companies like Verizon, who want to use facial recognition technology, who want to essentially monitor even the discussions, who's in your home, who's in the living room, what products are being consumed, what is the mood of the human beings that are communicating within your living room, and then to immediately push on you the advertisements that they feel you need, in addition to extracting all that information and data and storing it in these massive data centers, building a profile on everyone in the world without limit and without duration. They would just build and keep this information. So, as Edward Snowden said, when he was asked why should people be concerned about their privacy, they will have the ability to paint anyone in the context of a wrongdoer, is essentially what he helped us to understand. So this is something that's extremely serious, and it's important to note that without the meters being the device that harnesses and collects and extracts this information, these corporate control centers will not have the ability to achieve this.
Well, and there's some history that plays into this as well, and that's going to play into the next question. But what I'm hearing is it's the creation of an electronic gulag archipelago. For those who are familiar with the Solzhenitsyn factual work, it was a book set that tells you about his true life experiences as a prisoner in the camps. And when he describes how they had a whole system of people to provide information and to rat on people and to just make up information to stay out of the gulag, it very much reminds me of what all this data collection can be used for. Because eventually you could construct a picture of anybody that is not reflective of reality and yet is used in some sort of prosecution, and it's not unlike what this country does to go to war. They take some circumstantial aspects, they neglect other aspects of factual nature that would otherwise make you resistant to it, and they present you with a sales pitch, and most people buy it because they don't think about it. But this also ties in historically to the Cold War, cybernetics, and Zbigniew Brzezinski's interest in studying Eastern European countries, and he said that the Russians had the data collection down. They could get all this data, but they lacked the computing power to do anything useful for it. So could you comment on the history or legacy of cybernetics and how it plays in? This isn't something I'm sure that came onto your radar until you started digging into the history. It's not what they advertise smart meters to be, but there's a definite connotation of synergy between the smart grid and cybernetics in our culture.
Yeah, as far as cybernetics and the smart grid, I'm not an expert, to be honest, but there are expert sources, and there's copious information to establish the link between. I have read some of Zbigniew Brzezinski, and I do know what he was talking about in the late 60s and early 70s with respect to what really appears to be what is currently being implemented now. So when I found that out, that was quite shocking that this was being written about in this level detail as long ago as the 40 years ago, and even beyond then in terms of history in the 1930s with Technocracy Inc. So I have a cursory understanding of this, but yeah, it definitely seems that this is part of a bigger agenda to do with cybernetics, to do with essentially with transhumanism. What it appears to be is the merging of robotic and humanoid in a way that really is kind of disturbing when you look into it. I haven't gone into this in detail, but others have, and the evidence is pretty strong in my understanding.
Well, and you can only cover so much in one movie, and it's important not to distract the audience with anything other than the main points, and here's why it's important. And there's always plenty more that they can go find out. I mean, you mentioned transhumanism, which would bring me to the next question. Who funded and paid for this entire idea to make it popular in the first place?
Well, I'll go back as far as 2008, 2009, because others, again, have done more research to go back beyond then. But I'll just address that from in the here and now. After President Obama got elected, one of the first things he did, and this is according to Time magazine, is he asked for $100 billion to be spent from the federal stimulus money on the smart grid, on essentially pushing smart meters on everyone in the nation. So his transition team told him that only $11 billion was possible. So I guess that's what they settled for. But that still created such a huge financial incentives for utilities to essentially, just go along with the program. And an example of that is Pico in the Philadelphia area having $200 million dangled in front of them to install 600,000 smart meters by the end of 2014. This is a practice that has been applied throughout the country and throughout other countries as far as a stimulus money or a federal taxpayer grant to go along with the smart meter program. And it essentially puts the utilities in the position of having to defend their their practice of pushing these meters on an unwilling people, even though they vote against it, they rally and protest about it, they write letters about how this is not acceptable. They're still attempting to push this on people because they're getting rewarded so massively.
Well, and what's the reason behind our governments giving, because it's not just the United States government, it's the Canadian government, it's governments all over the world that are giving financial kickbacks to these companies to install grids that ultimately benefit the government and benefit these other companies that take our personal data and sell it. So there is this undercurrent of corruption on a seemingly innocent box that's just supposed to give some basic information on the side of your house, all of a sudden turns into this black hole of data that's just sucking every piece of information from every device in your house out and sending it to some of the people with the worst agendas and the biggest budgets. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, it seems to be, it's happening. Just look at the facts. This isn't even theory at all. Just looking at the facts, it's happening in every country at the same time. It's getting around all the existing legislation. And even though cities and even entire regions and provinces and states in some cases are issuing moratoriums, they're pushing forward anyways. So it's not just about money. That's obviously becoming clear. And I think it's definitely part of an international agenda to make us more docile and more reliable on Big Brother, literally, and to take away any control that we still have remaining in our own lives. So when you can have your finger on whether someone essentially lives or dies with energy and water and gas, these things can be shut off at any time. And when in the winter, when it's 20, 30 below, you're talking about the ability of either hacking or even a solar storm. There's been studies that even a solar storm can take out the entire smart grid. And incredulously, these meters are actually designed to shut off if they fail. So fail to off. It absolutely boggles the mind. But when you have this kind of a situation where you're no longer in control of the basics in your life, not only are you, paying 2 or 3 times more for energy, but you don't even, know for sure if you're going to have it tomorrow, then you're really in this situation where they can take any dissident or potential dissident and just disable them from the ground up. So it's really a scary situation that is somewhat remedied with the understanding and encouragement of the amount of people that are becoming aware about this and that are taking a stand and that are, writing letters and notices of they will not accept the meter on their home, such as the entire country of Germany recently said in July that, this smart grid program that the EU is pushing on us to the tune of $700 billion, it's not going to work for us. We don't want to go along with it. And the reason they used is because of cost. Now, with Germany's recent experience with fascism, only about 70 years ago, there's still people alive that were, in the Holocaust, in that whole experience. So they kind of have a little bit better memory of what it's like to have no rights. So it seems that that's kind of the undercurrent for the attitude in specifically in Germany, not wanting to go along with this. But in addition to that country, there's all these other countries in North America. Most states now have organized groups that are saying, wait a minute, you guys tried to sneak this under the table, and it's not going to fly. We're waking up and we're taking our power back. So it's not all fear, it's not all doom and gloom, and anything that would try to convince the people that they have to go along with this, that they have no choice, that there is a legal requirement, is absolutely not true. This is a voluntary program, but it's being used in an extortive way.
Well, I think it's only doom and gloom until you realize that it's happening and have the opportunity to inform yourself. Because, for instance, while you're talking, what happens if you don't pay your bill and they shut your smart meter off? I've read stories about them catching fire when they're turned back on, which is almost a eugenics agenda carried out against the poorest people, the people that can't afford to keep up with the ever-increasing rates of energy. I also heard undertones of Agenda 21, which is a worldwide, it's a global organizational effort to control all natural resources on this planet, including human resources. In order to carry out an agenda like that, they have to construct a grid, very much like what we're talking about in the smart grid, and have a hub of information that goes from inside your personal space, inside your privacy, to the outside world. That could be a smart meter, it could be a smartphone, it could be any number of smart devices. But the smart meters that are invasive, I think, are a good it's a good striking point for people to all come on the same page and realize, hey, we all use electricity. Yeah. We're all being taken advantage of by like GMOs and things like this as well. But this is something we also use and have very much in common. So could you talk a little bit about the market of this information that they collect on us? Is it marketed by these companies who are our alleged power companies? Are they selling it to third-party companies? And if so, what are they doing with it?
The California Public Utilities Commission was the first commission in the country to actually draft a privacy policy to do with smart meters. And their privacy policy basically said, and the press release announcing this privacy policy in 2011 basically said that we're going to essentially sell your data. So we hope this decision of this new privacy policy stimulates market interest, was the quote from one of the commissioners. Another one was basically like doublespeak. This privacy policy is going to ensure the privacy of your data while opening the door to authorized third parties to use the information. So here we have a press release in which they're admitting that they're distributing the information of everything that goes on in your home, and they're doing it for a profit. They're hoping that it generates them a profit. So again, this is another massive financial incentive that utilities have to keep forcing this ahead.
Well, and it's also a form of voluntary servitude, because if you ask those companies, they would say all of our clients sign this contract, and in the contract, you'll see in the small print, it says that we can do this. And that comes back to companies not taking care of their clients, not providing a service with integrity. It's all about just getting access to them, stealing their information, and selling it on the back end. If I recall, that was Mark Zuckerberg's idea for Facebook, was look at these dumb MFers. They're giving us all their information. They don't know that it's being sold out the back end. People still have yet to learn that lesson on a wide scale, but they're getting smarter every day because of people learning how to do some research, seeing some documentary films that start to get their wheels turning until you can get out there on your own to the point where you make a project because you see a problem, there has to be a solution, and that's what you've done with this film. So moving into some of these alleged claimed benefits that aren't being delivered to all the people that are paying for electricity. The people who are paying for electricity are paying for these meters, even though these meters are supposed to be subsidized. So it's very clever how these corporations are taking the government subsidies, but they're also making the individual customers pay for this. Yeah. Even people who don't yet have a smart meter are paying for people to have a smart meter against their will.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so not only are the taxpayer funds going to the tune of billions of dollars, but people's bills are in many cases like doubling after they have a smart meter installed. And in some cases, even higher than that. Toronto Hydro actually did a survey, and this is in the film and still available on their site. I mean, or on cbc.ca. They admitted that 80% of the customers' bills went up, not down, after having a smart meter installed, and that's even before the time of use billing is implemented. So obviously there's a systemic problem, and in Australia there was a news report in I believe a national television news channel last year about how there's systemic malfunctions, there's systemic billing inaccuracies with the smart meters there, and ostensibly here and everywhere else because the same thing is happening. And they're talking about, in that case, the whistleblower who brought this to the attention of the utility actually was they offered to pay him off. So this is the kind of the attitude, but there are so many revenue streams which utilities and corporations and government, and essentially they're all working together, it would appear. There's so many utility streams that they're creating with this smart grid, and it's decimating any last vestiges of rights.
Well, now that we've talked about the last vestiges of our rights and these convenient billing errors that always go into favor of those clever corporations, let's talk about some of the downsides of the smart meters that we haven't talked about. Let's let's go into any health effects that might have been covered in the film, bring that to people's attention in case they are in fact being sensitive to this electromagnetic radiation.
Most people can't believe that a low-powered microwave device has an effect on human health or environmental health and, plant life and bees and so forth. But the science has actually been essentially, it appears that what's gone on is a cherry picking of science. So the industry-funded studies over the past number of decades have systematically produced, they've been apparently set up in such a way to produce no biological effect between microwave radiation and human biological health. The independent studies, the majority of the independent studies show there is a biological effect. So this is to the tune of thousands of studies showing a positive effect. In the last 6 years, there's been 1,800 or more published peer-reviewed scientific studies that show that biological health is being affected from this type of radiation. So when you have the science showing that there's an effect happening, and when you have tens of thousands of people officially reporting to utilities that their lives are being harmed, they're having functional impairments, they can't sleep, they got ringing in the ears and all this other stuff, you have a situation where the truth is being suppressed in a very tangible way. There's about 8 or 9 PhDs in the film. So the PhDs and researchers that we interviewed in the film paint a picture whereby only a certain number of people might be showing immediate health damage from the type of radiation. But at the cellular level, both with microscopy, which is the first time that this has ever been done, where we look at the microscopic level health effects from these devices. And with the other lab work at the microscopic level, there's clear evidence that, the human form, the biology is being harmed, even though majority of people aren't showing negative effect in their symptomology. So this is potentially, and some of the PhDs talk about over the long-term time frame, this is a potentially crisis situation with the proliferation of this kind of radiation within the home, not only from the meter, but from all the smart appliances in the future, which will be essentially the equivalent of a transmitting cell phone, according to one of the experts we interviewed in the film, and according to industry literature. They're all going to be communicating wirelessly. So instead of one device that's bursting microwave radiation every few seconds, you would have 15 or 20 or 25 devices in your home doing that. Not only that with the microwave radiation, but there's an additional health problem to do with something called dirty electricity. So this is something that the old meters, the analog meters, which worked for decades, did not produce. But these new smart digital meters, actually, when the alternate current comes in the house, converts to direct current, they produce a field, which essentially that high-frequency field travels on the wiring in your house. And this seems to be something that is making people sick, and utilities don't want to talk about this.
This concept of dirty electricity begs the question, how is a smart meter different than the wireless router you might use for your computer or your cell phone or any of these other things that have been accustomed to our lifestyle here in North America?
It's a great question. To put it in perspective, a foot away from the smart meter and a foot away from an active cell phone on a call, if you have 4 or 5 bars on your cell phone is actually transmitting at a lower power density. We found that according to our testing and independent testing, the smart meter is actually approximately 8,000 times more radiation emitted than an active cell phone. So, I mean, number one, that's huge, and that's many, many times higher than international safe levels, which are actually based on published peer-reviewed science. In addition to that, the meters are not on a low, steady state like when you're on a cell phone call. They're actually bursting at a higher rate, and they're doing so on average every few seconds. So while the utilities are saying they're only on for 45 or 60 seconds a day, they're actually bursting every few seconds, and the length of the burst might only be a few milliseconds, but it's enough to cause harm according to the science and according to the effects that people are reporting. So it's the same frequency of energy, similar to a cell phone or similar to Wi-Fi, but the intensity of it can be significantly higher.
Well, and 8,000 times more radiation than a cell phone is something I would want to know about as a consumer, as somebody who would have other living human beings around wherever one of these boxes are. People in apartment buildings might live right on the other side of a wall that has a bank of 50, 60, 100 of these things all strapped in together. It also brings up the question, 8,000 times the radiation of a cell phone, how many of these pulses might go through a house during a day?
So PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric in California, actually admitted in a court of law that the meters on average are bursting more than 10,000 times per day, and some meters up to 190,000. So this is a vastly different picture than what they're painting to the general public.
Not to interrupt you, but are we legally obligated to accept smart meters on our properties?
Absolutely not, Rich. This is a federally sponsored voluntary program that utilities are, again, trying to create the perception that these are mandatory. So we have some pretty interesting evidence in the film that allows people to come to their own conclusion, but it's clear that there's a lot of misinformation going on. And when you have 95% of the population under the perception that we have to go along with this, that we have no choice, that we have no rights, that there's no legal, recourse that we have, then that's in exactly the position that this, control system is obviously going for. So what we're really doing with the film and with this information is getting it out, letting people know. One of the main points is, look, yeah, all this stuff is happening. It's actually true. It's, according to the evidence and all the research and all these experts, like they're actually trying to do this. But one of the main points you got to understand is you don't need to have one of these things on your home, either for your electricity or your gas or your water. So there's massive intimidation tactics at play here. But as people are realizing that, you can simply write a notice or claim your rights, which are unalienable, and essentially they seem to go away when you do that. When enough people do that, then you can have an entire neighborhood opting out, and then it expands from there. So this is essentially an awareness game, and then the action that spawns from the awareness.
Well, you mentioned the misinformation on this topic, and that brings me to the topic of the mainstream media. The reason that you had to go around the mainstream media and connect directly with the audience through a documentary is because we all need to learn to inform each other with accurate information and to be able to tell when we're being fed something that's not accurate information from reality, which the mainstream media. How has mainstream media reacted to the release of Take Back Your Power, and have they tried to do anything to discourage other people from seeing the film?
Well, it's interesting. We had a interview with a major network and their website, which was going to be broadcast nationwide. And I'll leave the name out for now. But it was one of the top networks in the country, and the editor, the story writer, and the editor were so flabbergasted at the story that they spent 20 minutes additionally than what they had booked on the interview to get the story, to find out the details, and it went to the editor-in-chief, and the story essentially got canned. So that's been kind of our experience, is that we're putting out information, we're putting it both to our lists and to the conscious community and people who are already aware of this and who can tell others virally. We're putting it to the mainstream as well, and the mainstream essentially we're getting not too much play so far, but we're hoping to bring this to the level at which it can no longer be ignored.
What are some of the solutions that you guys talk about in the film?
Well, number one is get involved and say no, write a letter, send it registered mail to your utility saying, you're either not going to have one of these meters, or if you already have one, you demand it to be removed. And so we have templates and we have letters and resources on the site. Number two is share the information. So essentially, those are the two main things that are really working for people. As an example of how awareness can grow quickly, in the city of Sedona, last week, several days after our launch, there's a core group of people there, got behind the film. They've been researching this for a couple of years. They had 3 sold-out screenings of Take Back Your Power on the same day. They added a second screening and a third screening, and they said that totally transformed and galvanized the entire region. So they're talking about not just locally, but they're talking about expanding out and increasing the opt-out zone.
How did Foster Gamble come to be involved in your project?
Well, I've been a fan of Thrive, and I actually hosted 2 screenings a couple of years ago in my neighborhood, and I just essentially was trying to reach him because I intuitively felt, there's such an awake community around the Thrive film that this information needs to really proliferate, needs to get out to these guys. So I was actually able to come to Foster through a mutual friend, and essentially just asked him to review our work in progress. He reviewed it. He had a tremendously positive feedback. And so basically from there, it's history. I asked him what he knew about this. Has he been following this issue? And it turned out he actually has quite a wealth of information on this subject, specifically as it relates to the energy question itself and new technologies that have been both developed but suppressed.
What's the most important concept that an individual should consider when weighing the decision of whether or not to support or to protest against smart meters?
I think deciding what's important to you. If the concept of free will and self-determination, or essentially, choosing your life the way you will, if that's important to you, then we really need to take a stand on this issue because of the plans that have been, put forward for this whole control grid going forward.
Josh, what's a URL where people could learn more and experience the community, very similar to that which we have at Tragedy and Hope, where they can get in and start asking questions and working with other real human beings in reality to do something about this problem?
TakeBackYourPower.net is our website. You can watch the film online or order DVD, sign up to host a screening in your community. We're also launching here very shortly an online discussion forum. So you'll be able to go in there and ask questions, get answers, develop solutions, find out what's working for communities who have opted out, find out about all these cities. There's a number of cities who have actually criminalized this and who are fining utilities for every smart meter they're installing. So finding out what's working in other areas and then duplicating that in your area, starting your own group and getting going from there. So TakeBackYourPower.net is really the website that we've designed to essentially be the hub of where you can get connected with groups who are active no matter where you are.
You can only show the audience so much at one given time, and I'm glad that you focused in and stuck to the substantial, palatable information that people can consume and digest and make part of themselves and start to take a step in the right direction. So Josh, I just wanted to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to share and discuss this project, this very important project with the world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rich and Lisa. Really appreciate your guys' work. And also just wanted to give you guys a credit for not only do we have a really powerful interview in the can ready to go for a future project, but you filmed Blake Levitt for Take Back Your Power, and that turned out to be one of the main cornerstone interviews that we used in the film because she's an expert. She's been researching this actually since the 80s, since it's just been in the works and being planned. So just want to thank you guys for having me on, for your work, and you've got an awesome empowered community, and I look forward to working with you guys.
And with all that being said, if you'd like to know more, you can screen Take Back Your Power conveniently enough at tragedyandhope.com/TBYP. Also, takebackyourpower.net. As always, you can visit tragedyandhope.com, where an hour a day keeps ignorance at bay. There you have our video catalog, our podcasts, all for free, and an online learning community for those who subscribe so that we can continue producing educational content with integrity. Tragedy and hope. Knowledge is useful because you can't give to others what you haven't yet attained for yourself. Until next time, I'm Richard Grove, and I thank you for tuning in and not dropping out.